Hello, and thanks for joining us on the podcast that discusses all things gaming. Coming to you from the home of Gen Con and the gaming capital of the world, this is The Established Facts. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Established Facts. I am your host, Big Don, and starting to my right...
This is Princess Katie.
This is Josh.
This is Rhaegar.
Hey guys, this is Derek. This is Anton.
And this is Prime.
And we are going to be discussing some really fun things with the coming revelation of a lot of digital products and video games. So, without further ado, we'll get into our versus topic of digital software versus physical hardware in gaming terms. Hey. I got nothing. So what we're talking about is for those of you who are not in the know, if you have a current or future, soon to be future generation console. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name of it. You have an option when you purchase a game to either download the actual game straight to your hardware to be able to play, which usually takes quite a decent amount of memory space depending on the game. Or you can go out and you can buy a hard physical copy that comes on a Blu-ray disc or a standard DVD or something like that. So basically, we were just comparing and contrasting the advantages and disadvantages of having to download the full content digitally on your console versus having the actual hardware. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Prime. And so, digital hardware versus digital software versus physical hardware. What do you think?
I think I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I'm going to have to, because just weighing the pros and cons of either is just going to put me on the fence. I don't want to necessarily get into detail yet, but yeah, I'll just say I'm on the fence.
Okay.
For me, it's probably going to be soft or digital. Pretty much every game I own right now has been downloaded.
Derek?
I'm going to go with physical.
Rhaegar?
Digital, but there's a few things in the with the government associated with like utilities and whatnot. Digital.
Okay.
I'm going to have to say physical as well, and I'll discuss why in a moment.
I'm still stuck in like the Stone Age of gaming and really don't trust anything that doesn't come on a cartridge, so I'm going to have to say physical.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, that just happened.
Do they make
So we have a
cassette
third
tape
option.
video games?
Cassette tape video
Cassette tape video games?
8 tracks.
Better quality that way.
Yeah, I guess maybe. Well, I'm going to say that I am a much bigger fan of the actual hardware. Digital copies are pretty sweet, but for some reason, just the enjoyment of knowing that I'm putting that disc in to play it for the first time is, I don't know, nostalgia. So, Anton, you said you started to talk about the digital download and things like that, like most of the games that you own. Why is it more of an attraction for you to be able to download everything to, say, a hard drive or a memory stick to be able to play?
Well, in my current situation, it's nice because all I have to do is sign into my account and I can get access to every game that I own without having to take them anywhere. Well, granted, I'll have to download them to whatever console I'm on, but I can just sign into my PlayStation account and I have access to my entire library.
And so does it deter you to go to hardware because there are so many different games that you play? You don't have to necessarily carry 42,000
Pretty much.
DVDs or Blu-rays with you.
Or going through bookcases to try to find which one. alphabetically sorted by A through Z.
And then
Right.
you buy a new game and you have to resort your entire library.
Now let's pull all of those out, turn them back in for reimbursement.
Yeah, and the king of that is definitely Josh.
Yeah.
What?
Trading in
Well,
games and things like that.
I do okay.
What are you doing, sir?
Just continue.
You're
or we-
distracting me.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm prepping for other recordings.
Oh, okay.
You know.
Well, geez.
Girls, you're both pretty.
One
Let's continue.
recording at a time. Sorry, I went 13 on your thing.
Don't fall apart on us now.
Right? So I'm going to have to say that probably one of the biggest reasons why I like the actual physical hard copy versus the digital software is there's something about and for some people maybe it's an annoyance because they have social phobia or something like that, but there's something about being able to stand in line with a bunch of people that you share an interest with for a midnight release of whatever game, Modern Warfare or Halo or whatever game. I enjoy them. Don't look at me like that, Derek. I enjoy being able to stand in line with a bunch of people that I'm getting their gamer tags or something like that, and we're hooking up on Xbox Live later after we all get the game, and we're going to rock out on what, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the other reason.
Podcast.
Yeah,
End of
I know.
story.
Well, out of most of the people at the table, I am probably one of the most social as far as being able to interact with people.
Even I can give it up to Don on that one.
I'm an ENFP for those of you who have taken that test.
and I'm an ENFJ.
Yeah.
And I am an INFJ.
That's right.
I have no idea.
That's why.
That's right.
I'm an IDK.
I'm an ESFP.
Yes, yeah. Anyhow,
That's why Don's both our host and our marketing director.
that's right. That's right. Because I talk to everybody about our podcast, and it gives me an opportunity to talk to people about other games and things like that. That's why I love going to Gen Con and sitting at a table with people that I've never gamed with, because they're going to have experiences and stories that I have never gotten a chance to experience and to check out. And the same goes for when I'm standing in line for the newest copy of Halo or something like that. It's because I really get a kick out of meeting people that I have never met before that we share an interest with. So, I mean, I think that when you have a digital copy, though, it's easier to just turn your console on, select what games you like to download those games, put all your credit card information in, get hacked by somebody on the Sony network, and then lose all your money.
Be quiet, Ragar.
Oh, sorry.
That's Don.
That's right.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, because it sounded an awful lot like you.
But, I mean, my point is, though the convenience is there where you can just download the client, I think that there's something about the community of gamers that I get out of having the hardware that kind of goes outside of the realm of just the game. It's really the full community experience of being a gamer, and I think in general that's what I get out of being a gamer anyway. Derek?
Can I give you the introvert version of that?
Yes, please. Because you said hardware too.
Yes,
Did you
I
not?
did.
Yeah.
I did. One of my concerns is space on, especially a console, and having to download a game onto it. I don't know how many games I can put on it because games nowadays are like
Multi-gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's also tactile for me. I like to actually feel the disc, I like see the disc, so I know what's on my system. I don't have to search through a library and see what I have. So it's like, oh, I haven't played that in months, so I'm going to take that down and play that. So that's the reason why I like physical copies, and it allows me to not have to worry if I've downloaded something to a device, because sometimes I travel a lot, so that way I can just bring the physical discs with me, and I don't have to worry about, okay, is my laptop have like the requisite number of space and so forth. So.
Well, I know that Anton said that he likes the digital stuff for convenience, and Derek said he likes the digital stuff because you can. I'm sorry, the physical stuff, because you can kind of arrange what you're taking with you and have the games that you specifically would like to play while you're out of town or whatever. The only fence sitter that we had was Prime. So explain to me why you're kind of in between both worlds.
Well, part of the reason is because though I can appreciate like physically having the copy, like I'll give you an example, like playing WoW. If I have the actual CDs of that, I can just download it on a computer. And if my computer craps out on me, I've still got the video games, or I still got the games that I can download onto another computer versus the digital copy of having to take those extra steps to recover my game, and reestablish my account and stuff. But the problem that I have is with games that are out of production, it's a little bit difficult to get the physical copies of those. So if you can, I don't know, get on Xbox Live and download something that was produced on Xbox and still be able to play it on your Xbox 360, you can't necessarily. You might have a little bit more of a difficult time doing so.
Derek?
You do bring up a very good point because on my phone I downloaded the entire NES and Super Nintendo catalog almost on there, and you can't get those physical copies easily anymore. So these digital downloads extend the lifespan of these classic games, and therefore I don't say that there isn't a place for digital. There certainly is, but if I have a choice between physical or digital, I'd choose physical.
For me, nowadays, even I've noticed a lot of my friends use hard copy games, physical discs and stuff. And a good example was GTA 5 had a 10 gig install, 15 gig install,
12.
Holy cow.
That was the install from the Blu-ray onto the physical console. So, I mean, my download from the PlayStation Store was 18 gigs. So, I mean, you're installing so much onto the consoles nowadays because the consoles, they don't want to wait for load times. You're still installing a ton of material. The other kicker to mine, if I don't want to game on my console right now, I can just uninstall it and then grab it later and reinstall it if I want to play it again. Because it's in my library. But with the size of consoles nowadays, I probably got 20, 25 games on my console, and I'm not even hurting for space. And I've got an older console at this point. So, space is not really becoming, it does become a problem, especially if you're running 60 or 70, trying to run 60 or 70 games on your console.
I remember Josh having...
Josh had an original console. An original console. Has an original console.
It's on its third hard drive now because the 60 gig I filled up, and then the 120 gig I filled up, and then the 250 gigs. Oh, it's on its fourth.
Yeah, fourth.
So it's on its fourth hard drive, but it's an original generation PlayStation 3.
He only had 60 gig to begin with. My console started at 500.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are both coming with 500 gig hard drives in them because of this. And that's actually one I want to get into the what I was trying to talk about. Actually, it pawns right off what you were saying. I prefer the physical disc. Yes, with lightning, high-speed internet that we have nowadays, and you can get things very quickly, a 12 gig download will take, for the most part... will take, for the most part, less time than installing it from the disc. Well, sorry, a download will take more time than installing it from the disc. And for me, that's technologically speaking, I would rather install it from the disc because I don't have to worry about for download times. Yes, I've got to wait the half hour, 45 minutes for installation, but I don't have to wait on download time. And that's where I'm coming from because they're the same. Digital, physical, in this case, especially in this day and age, they're identical for what they're able to pull off. Well, it's a portability issue, and if you have the high-speed internet to take care of it, yes, I like what Derek was saying about maintaining the legacy of the Nintendo games via emulators and ROMs, which we are not, mind you, we're not condoning illegal activity by having illegal copies of ROMs, but we know they're out there.
Using an emulator is not illegal.
No, it's having a ROM.
How you acquire ROMs.
If you own a physical copy of the game and have a ROM, it's the same thing as copying a CD onto your computer. But
this is something that I would really like Nintendo and Sega to do is come up with a legitimate way to.
Some of that is not their fault.
Well, they come. I mean,
Because of licensing, they don't. Nintendo and Sega don't actually own a lot of the licensing for the original games that they came out on the consoles. The manufacturer, the developer of the game, owns the licensing for that.
Yeah,
They ran into that problem with Homeworld. When the recent purchase of Homeworld,
Right.
the developer didn't owned the licensing for Homeworld. It then sold it to THQ later, which is
Okay.
why Homeworld 3 never came out. Because the developer didn't want to develop it. Now that THQ's fallen, somebody else has purchased the rights, and they're planning on releasing Homeworld. But Homeworld was one of the top selling space RTSs of all time. And that's it. It really does fall into the who owns the licensing for that particular game. And NES games are horrible about that because almost Nintendo
they're
not really
they're like 30 years old.
was not really a developer back then. Outside of
Don't
Mario,
they have all of those little stickers of official.
but that doesn't matter. What that means, they were the official distributor and official. Think of a book publisher, same concept.
Right,
The
but the
publisher doesn't always own the rights to the book. The author owns the rights to the book, and if
Okay.
the author says no, then no.
I think
Unless the
I
contract
think
states
what it
otherwise.
comes. I think what it comes down to is just It's really a matter of who owns the IP. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily the licensing; it's the actual IP.
The
It's,
actual
it's the
intellectual
intellectual property that
That's
you
what
have
I
to worry
mean.
about.
True,
Yeah,
true. I mean,
yeah.
but I still would like. I mean, Gamer Wish. I mean, I would still like to.
Well, Nintendo's doing that. Buy a Wii or Wii U.
Yeah, the Wii or Wii U, they're,
Well,
they're
and-
actually reproducing or re-releasing the.
Yeah, there's a
NES
lot of
games.
there's a lot of the Wii does it. I mean, the Xbox and the PS3 have done it where they have collections like a Capcom collection that you can download or that you can buy the disc of.
And that's what I would definitely
Yeah.
like to see. But I mean, I'd like to have it in a format where I can have the original controller because, like, remapping some of that stuff with
Yeah.
the new controller,
Oh, yeah.
is a pain in the
But to have
butt.
like an eclectic like arcade style
yeah,
controller, like they always have for some reason they always have like on the Capcom or depending on the actual distributor of like the legacy arcade games, they have like Joust and they have like Centipede. Well, if you ever played the original Centipede, you had a roller ball
Yep.
and you had a button. That's it. The original Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man, you had a joystick. That's all you needed. But it's like,
Pong, joystick, end of story.
yeah. Well, Pong was a
Joystick and a button.
No,
well,
it was
no.
a,
Pong was
dial.
a yeah.
Dial.
It was like
Yeah,
a dial style.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
God,
No button.
been too long.
None.
No button.
But there's a good example of a hardware company that's
They got out when
become-
it was good.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They became a publisher with all the money they made on their hardware.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And something that we've kind of brought up a little bit in this conversation about digital versus hardware is the downloading of game clients. You were talking about a 12 gigabyte download versus a 16 gigabyte download. And one thing that I thought was interesting was, and I know we're not necessarily going to talk about them too much as a whole, is a conversation for a later episode, but with the Xbox One and the PS4, the biggest controversy, if you will, that they got into was the limiting of licensing downloads for games. And I think it's interesting that so many people got so upset about the idea of you buy one game, you download one game, you own one game, nobody else can use your game. But in the same respect, before consoles became the media giants that they are now, PCs ran the exact same way. You bought a PC game, you entered a licensing code. That licensing code registered your game as its own unique product, and yes, you could go and find codes online and things like that. Not that we're condoning any of that. In all honesty, it really bothers me that kind of stuff is out there.
It's still that way today.
And that's what I'm saying. But it is on, in my opinion, it is on a much more limited basis or marketplace than, say, people who pirate games or hand their games to their friends and things like that. And I understand there was talk about there being like a limited licensing where you could let one or two friends borrow your game or something like that. But I mean, to be honest, I would rather my friends come over and play a game and experience the game in my house and then say, wow, that game was really fun, I'm going to go out and buy it for my own console, just like they could with your PC, than hand my copy of Halo 4 around to 700 different people and never get it back, or something along those lines. Now, I know that when we first asked this question, Josh and Katie, you both also said that you like hardware, and Katie, you said more for like the nostalgic reasons and things like that. So give me a little bit of insight on what sort of experience you have when you buy a physical copy and things like that. Like, why is that more enjoyable to you than just going and buying a digital download?
Are you going to be like super creeper and like talk everybody in the line, or?
Hey! I'm not creepy. I'm bubbly. There's a difference. If I made a weird face while I was doing it, then it's creepy. It was
Okay.
like,
Yeah, that'd be creepy.
yeah, exactly.
If they're introducing themselves and she's immediately looking them on Facebook,
Oh, hang on, wait.
that's
What's
creepy.
your middle name? Social security number? Mother's maiden name? Oh, thanks. You just bought me 8 pairs of shoes from China. But no.
And we don't condone that, by the way.
No, we don't.
And I don't actually do that either, so.
I don't do that anymore.
Anyways, no. Actually, I was going to build off of what you were saying with the.
Buy shoes from China, that is not.
Donald, I'm talking.
I mean, I'll
sorry.
mooch anything, but
It's important.
Off what you were saying with letting your friends borrow your games, I actually like that. That was always a big thing. Like my friends and I, we would always just trade games with each other instead of everybody having to buy every game. You just shared whatever you had with your friends. Also, I like physical copies because I've never really lived anywhere that's had fast internet or even remotely decent internet. So
Until
that's actually lived someplace. Anyways, I've never had the internet. My parents are like back in the Stone Ages still with their technology. Like they refuse to do anything modern at all.
still on dial-up.
Yeah, basically. Like if they could be, my dad would still be on dial-up. So for me, obviously
still
having
exists.
the physical copy
Just saying.
is much better than having to download something where it's like you still have 850 hours left of download time.
I remember those days.
And that's actually a good segue into the stuff that I was planning on talking about. So, while I'm for the digital media, there are still a lot of things in place that restrict it from being the medium that it could be. One is that, 70% or something ridiculous is still on dial-up or doesn't even have an internet connection.
At least in the U.S., it's pretty high.
Yeah. But the reasons that I wanted to go digital is because we need to push that kind of stuff forward. There's a couple things that we're looking at. One is the aspect of distribution. It's more cost-effective to the developers, the publishers, if they can do a digital release, which means there's a greater freedom of games that are available to us, like Minecraft, and these indie games can be self-developed and self-published. And then it also reduces the cost to the major publishers, which can then come back to us, and ultimately it'll be a lower cost game.
Yeah, we'll see that happen.
Well, it should.
And you're seeing it more outside of the major publishers. You're seeing it more along the lines of the indie developers because they don't have to go through the cost of distribution and printing physical media and dealing with all of the requirements for getting the barcode and all of the stuff to actually put it into a retail store. So you're just cutting out that entire chain of mass to stick it into a digital download system. And with things like Steam's Greenlight, they're actually getting it into the open marketplaces a lot easier because you can actually get them onto
PlayStation Network and Xbox. Well, Xbox Live's a little more locked down, but the PlayStation Network does provide that option as well, self-publishing
if you
to the
can get
network.
access to the network.
Well, it's
It's a
lot more open.
$300,000 license fee to allow it to
Not
get on the
anymore.
console.
Not anymore.
That-
They removed. It's not that they're doing the publishing through the system on the PlayStation 4. You literally go through your system to publish the game.
Well,
Yeah.
that's on the PS4. That's
I
not
know,
the
but
current
it's
system.
coming. And I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. we just need to continue pushing this stuff forward. Like the other idea where they're doing segmented downloads. We're streaming it so that you download the intro sequence and you can put the rest of the game in a background mode, so you can play, while it's still installing in the
I think
background.
the big game that does that is WoW. World of Warcraft does that on PC, where you can start
StarCraft
playing.
2.
Yeah, StarCraft 2 does that now too.
Both next gen consoles are planning to have
what
that.
about Katie's situation where she doesn't have internet? And
Well, that's getting back to my complaint at the very beginning of this, which is the government should really push to make internet a utility. But that's not.
we are not
essentially-
going to go down that path because
Not right now.
is fraught with caltrops. So
Well, there is a high-speed requirement plan for the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's also technically not a government right now either, so I mean,
No, it's still there. It's just
Well,
shut down.
at least at the time of this recording.
yeah.
Non-critical. Government's critical
Government's in
services.
sleep mode right now, guys.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
okay, that was worth.
That was good. But you're right. If you hadn't heard, the UN has made a declaration that it's a human right to have access to the internet. Not that
Yes.
really matters that much, but
Still gotta buy
And
it.
the U.S. does have a high-speed plan in place
Yeah.
to require the 90% of the United States have access to high-speed internet by 2017. I think.
Yes, but there's a big difference between wiring Britain and wiring the
Yeah.
United States.
And that's where a lot of I talk to most people are talking about how they go, like Don was mentioning, stand in line with friends and stuff like that. My friends I talk to over Steam and Skype and TeamSpeak and stuff like that. Majority of people I talk to are from outside the U.S. And that's something that I've had to. It's one of the barriers I've had to break down, is you realize my state is nearly the size of Europe, or nearly the size of Great Britain. Great Britain's only like 10% larger than the state of Indiana. So he's like, yeah, but how about wiring the blah 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 and blah? I'm like, look, you're having the budget to do that, roughly the same budget to wire my state versus our country, because the budget for some of those carriers over there are very close to some of the budgets that AT&T and other carriers here are budgeting for hardline. I'm specifically talking more tier 1 carriers stuff.
yeah, I would
But
say that too.
but their budget they're spending is the same over there as over here, and they're having to go a lot. They're having to stretch it a lot farther over here.
agreed. I
So-
mean, try to think about wiring Vermont with all the mountains there. I mean,
Credit
Or
your
North
medical tunnel
Carolina.
bore.
well, yeah, but then you'll get all the environmentalists up in arms, and that's their economy is the environment.
I mean, couldn't you theoretically, we are getting a little off topic, but
A little?
What's new?
yeah,
Whatever.
theoretically, if you were to run like a digital pickup line at certain points,
They already do that.
I know that, but I'm saying, like, for example, there are certain smaller communities like Broad Ripple or Beech Grove here in Indianapolis that are either smaller cities that are encompassed in Indianapolis or other communities that are encompassed in Indianapolis that have a central hub where a public dispersed internet is available,
Right.
and all you have to do is log on to it.
Well,
mean-
you have to pay for it in Beech Grove.
Right, but what I'm saying is, you could theoretically do that and just have each city or each state cover their own. You make it a federal mandate where each state is allowed to have their own regulations on through the FCC on the internet that they may or can provide.
It boils down to cost, pretty much. To give you an idea, the Beech Grove one, Beech Grove's 3-4 square miles.
something like that.
Yeah, it's only a city of about 25,000-30,000, and it costs them like $750,000 to put in their Wi-Fi, to run all the lines to all those telephone poles, set up all the power, maintain all the power bills, and the internet costs for all those poles.
Okay,
And there was no subsidies on that, none.
right.
They don't exist. But do you think about that? That's a very densely populated. In terms of a couple of us are from there, and the city itself is fairly dense. There's not long distances or anything like that. Now go to Montana, try to do that in something up there.
Right.
It just you put one Wi-Fi node in there for one house.
Yeah, pretty much. And Wi-Fi in of that, I would never go on.
Because that's what
type of
Beach Grove is
Wi-Fi.
doing. It's just got a public Wi-Fi
Right,
system.
right. But what I'm saying is, with that availability, I mean, what you are doing is you are then providing a choice. You can say, look, if you want better internet, go through a satellite company, go through a cable company, get your own private internet provider, or you have the opportunity to use this wireless feed that the city has that happens to also be satellite or what have you, that is running at, half the speed that you could buy your own at.
Right, but it works in cities that are relatively densely populated.
Right.
People can actually use that for their home internet. But cities that aren't, that doesn't work at all. Because there again, the node that you're distributing the public Wi-Fi off of might touch 3 people, and that's it.
Oh, because of the spread out.
How far apart people's
Okay,
homes are.
the
So
geography
I mean,
and things
you got
like
to keep in
that.
mind.
Okay.
A buddy of mine lives up in South Dakota, and there's everybody there has more than an acre of property.
Right.
So you're like a good example is here in my parents' house. There's an acre on every person's land. My Wi-Fi won't touch my neighbor, no matter how strong you put it. And to get it to a point where my Wi-Fi could reach their house, I'd have to break FCC regulation on it. I'd have to physically go beyond the 1 watt range.
Going back to something you guys brought up earlier, though, the fact that environmentalists are interested in getting involved with stuff like this, well, that kind of bounces over to the other point that I wanted to make, which was physical space versus digital space. Mm-hmm. With physical space, every time you purchase a game, you're purchasing plastic associated with the... somebody's messing with my mic here. So every time you purchase the game, you're going to have the plastics associated with the case, the CD, the
paper,
manual,
the book.
yeah, and that's going to end up getting into landfills at some point. Whereas with digital space, the memory size requirements are getting smaller and smaller, and you're able to create this new dimension of a warehouse
and
that
when
you can store on your
you're-
phone.
When you're done with it, you wipe it away, and it just kind of vanishes.
Right, but what the environmentalists would be concerned about is the infrastructure required to get internet to all those people.
I understand. It's just, there's a trade-off
Oh,
to
yeah.
not doing that.
Oh, totally. I'm just relaying what's...
Well, it's the truth in
Occam's
technology. It's the truth in technology. What's necessary right now in order to make something, a nationwide internet access like that would be a full-on infrastructure replacement.
Yes.
Not is it because we have copper lines run through almost the entire country for telephone, and it's just not enough right now.
Right.
In order to do it, would be a full-on infrastructure change, which is an expense, and that's where we're at right now. Unless
they're
it goes
slowly doing
to
it.
full wireless, which you're looking at satellite and cellular companies, which is why you see folks like Verizon and Sprint, AT&T trying to roll out their networks as fast as they can because they're hoping the government will come to them and go, "Wow, you guys have high-speed internet nearly everywhere in the country. Can we subsidize off you?"
A perfect,
Yeah, write us a check.
perfect example of the actual infrastructure stuff about the high speed is looking into how Google is doing the Google Fiber, and the fact that they have to go in, lay all those lines to every residence to be able to get that infrastructure in place for them to have that kind of high speed.
Sorry, Don, it seems like the check bounced.
Right. But that's just one of those examples. A perfect example of the required infrastructure and the speed at which it actually works in the U.S. is watching Google Fiber get rolled out into cities, and those cities are 100% welcoming this.
I know Google is doing another thing for places like Africa. Mm-hmm. They're looking at doing a balloon system.
Balloon wireless distribution.
Yep.
Talk about third world.
It's pretty much going to be cellular floating in a hot air balloon.
That's awesome.
That's baller.
So yeah, it's coming.
Right,
It's
but
just-
I mean, the other hurdle that we're going to have to overcome, and are you guys ready for this transition? Because it's going to be awesome.
I think I'm expecting it.
Is overcoming this misconception that video games contribute to violence.
Okay.
Bombshell dropped.
Yep.
So, in other words, you want to go on to our regular topic of the day.
Yes, I do.
Wasn't what I was expecting, but yeah, it's probably appropriate.
Yeah, I was
It
expecting
is.
that.
I was going to transition into that too,
Well, I just got
but
there ahead of
but
you.
yours was better than
Thank
mine,
you.
So.
His was.
It was
I
first.
concur.
It was.
Was first.
You set the bar.
And it's a very low bar.
I've played Limbo, but I can't go that low.
There you
Wow.
go. Just step over it.
That's how Scott.
So yeah, our discussion topic is basically about violence and just general content in modern day gaming, especially. I think that probably up until the last, I'm going to say 10 years, most games that you had seen, even if they were first person shooters, there was a certain. I can still remember, just to kind of look back on the nostalgia that is my video gaming history. I can still remember sitting in my bedroom as a child and getting the first Mortal Kombat on my Super Nintendo,
Oh my gosh.
and my parents freaking out because when you punched somebody in the face,
There was red.
there was a red streak of what might be considered blood spatter.
extremely pixelated blood.
Yeah, extremely pixelated blood.
Was that also
and you can-
Was it Mortal Kombat 1 that had the fatality?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All the Mortal Kombat's have had
Every Mortal
fatalities.
Kombat has had the fatality version.
No, they didn't. They took them out once because.
Oh yeah, one of them did.
They made it a selectable option, actually.
That's stupid.
Yep.
There's no reason to play Mortal Kombat if you can't punch somebody in the pit
But
and
that
land
was
on
right,
spikes.
right during that time
Yeah.
when the government was
Friendship.
investigating, or the babalities.
Babality. Yeah. Those. Anyhow.
Anyways,
But yeah, I mean that's definitely a hot button issue when it comes to especially video game media, is what is an acceptable amount of content for a specific demographic and audience. And one thing, I worked at a big box electronics store for a little over a year, and it was amazing to me to be able to look at the differences between video game consoles and the content in which they marketed to. Because you would never see Assassin's Creed on a Wii. It's on the Wii U now, but when the original Wii was the big hit item for younger gamers and family gaming, you saw, Dance Dance Revolution, and you saw, what's the Mickey Mouse paint game, whatever.
Epic Mickey.
Epic Mickey, games like that on the Wii console, and then on the Xbox and on the PS3, you had much more mature adult content with your Grand Theft Autos, which is probably, in my opinion, one of the bigger hitters when it comes to a mature themed game.
But
Now,
that stems out of Leisure Shoot Larry. Way back
oh yeah,
in the 90s.
absolutely, and that's a Leisure Shoot Larry was a PlayStation game,
It was originally a
PC.
computer game.
was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
PC game.
It was by the same people that did King's Quest. Well,
Okay.
Space Quest, King's Quest,
Yeah.
all that. So Sierra. So yeah,
You're just looking for another reason to bring up King's Quest.
I do. I
2 weeks
miss
ago-
that game so much.
2 episodes ago, he couldn't stop talking about it. It was terrible.
know.
But I mean, the point is, in my opinion, I'm a father of 2 young children, and I know that video games are a big part of my life, and gaming in general is a big part of my life, and I know that it's going to subsequently be a big part of theirs. My 4-year-old already begs me to play Chutes and Ladders with him because it's a game that he gets to sit down and play with mommy and daddy, and it's a really cool opportunity, but the future concerns of how liberal movies and games have become is definitely something that concerns me for the future of my children, because I'm not saying that I haven't sat down and played Metal Gear Solid or Grand Theft Auto or something with an F-bomb or digital side boob or something like that on the console. But what I am saying is, I don't know how appropriate that is, A, for me to play, much less B, for my children to be playing in front of me and their friends. So, yes, Katie.
Well, it's funny actually that you mentioned how liberal movies and games are, because part of my issue that I have with people like, well, video games are too violent. And it's not just video games. Media as a whole is incredibly violent. So that's something that you have to start out with, is it's not just video games. You know, that's what bothers me. A lot of people like to peg it on gaming, but it's really not just games. It's all sorts of, TV shows, movies, whatever type of media you can imagine. YouTube videos, stuff that's, small and indie and viral, incredibly violent. So that's my little beef on the whole video games are too violent. But also, I think it's just been throughout, all of gaming. Everybody's always thought, there has to be some restriction to the amount of violence that you have. Because I remember the original Ocarina of Time cartridge that came out had red blood when you killed the main bad guy, and people got really offended. So the second release of the cartridge actually had him with green blood when you killed him. It wasn't red. It was this green oozy stuff. So I think personally, video games have always just been so easy to target because they're such a newer form of media compared to everything else. They were a fringe form of media for the absolute longest time. So it just makes it really easy for people to say, oh, well, it's video games. I mean, now, do I think that some things are a little too violent? Yes, but I think that's every person's individual, what are you willing to play? And when it comes to children, yes, there's only so much you can do to limit your kids' intake, but that's with every other type of media. You can say, in my house, we're not going to watch this movie, we're not going to watch this TV show, we're not going to play these games, and your kids can go to anybody else's house who has a different set of standards and say, well, I'm going to watch this movie at Johnny's house because Johnny's parents don't really care what Johnny watches.
But that's parental responsibility.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying, though.
And I think that's what they're using this, pinning on video games is, well, the parents don't have any time, and so therefore they're not responsible for their
that's
children.
what I'm saying, is that video games are like any other media. You restrict what you can restrict, and then beyond that, it's beyond your control.
And there are tools to do that. I mean, like TV restrictions.
We saw the release of the back in the early 80s, they released the whole TV rating system. Mm-hmm. And then in the late 90s they released the game rating system after some of the original.
I want to say that they started doing that in 99, 2000, 2001.
Yeah, that whole right there
ESRB rating system,
But I mean, so it's very very obvious today if a game has violence in it. And I'm sorry, some of this is getting completely out of hand because I saw a recent article that blamed the game Minecraft for violence. And the particular instance, the kid brought knives, guns, and a hammer, none of which are actually in the game Minecraft. Mm-hmm. Those weapons don't exist under the default game. How can you blame the game for that when the kid's bringing that, when he says he based it on the game?
Well, again, it gets back to the delusion of people not actually, one, playing the game to actually see what's going on with it,
right,
and two, trying to deflect responsibility from parents and schools,
or the kid,
or the kid, yeah.
And the kids are doing it just as a way to.
It's not my fault. I was just,
mimicking.
I saw it on a game, or I saw it on a movie.
Actually, it gets back into cosplaying at like Gen Con. Mm-hmm. They put a restriction on some of the secondary features that you can have in costumes. Like your gun has to have orange tape or a cap or something.
Safety tip.
To identify it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily a Gen Con thing.
Yeah, that's a city ordinance. That's not necessarily.
That's actually an Indianapolis law.
But that's still similar to this in the sense that
it is. I think that there's definitely a control issue that comes down to is kind of consenting the rest of the public on what you are doing or what you as an entity are doing, not necessarily as you as an individual, but as a party
and in
are doing.
Specifics of Gen Con, that's actually for our police force, so that they can tell a substitute firearm from an actual firearm, and especially in events during Gen Con, because there's so many out-of-towners in town, and there's so much stuff going on, and there's a lot of police force downtown, and it's a lot easier to go, okay, that has an orange tip, that's not a real firearm.
It's a hectic environment that could quickly go hostile.
Very quickly escalate. So that's especially in con situations. That's
Yeah.
one of those situations.
Well, and a
I
lot
don't-
of those-
I don't see a downside to doing something.
A lot of those
Yeah.
provisions have to do with just public safety in general.
right.
The reason that they don't want you to walk around with a real bladed sword, even though I see about a
100
third
of
of the attendees that come and buy stuff just walk around with the katana that they just bought from inside. The reason that they don't want you to do that is because it's a public safety issue. You may not hurt someone with the thing that you just bought, but your buddy who really wants to check out your new thing might start swinging it around and hurt quite a few people. And then the person who's liable is the person who has the receipt in their pocket for it.
Or better yet, for the amount of people that are actually there, there could just be the fact that there's little kids around.
Yeah,
they could
exactly.
Just randomly just accidentally run into whatever you have.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Next thing you know, you injure a little kid, and yeah.
But I mean, getting back to violence, I mean, we can even go to role playing on this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I mean, even now, I have like parents or my parents coming to me and saying, why does everything have to be? Why does all of your storylines have to have violence in it? Why can't you just have happy like storylines? Why does everything have to be so depressing? I'm like, there has to be conflict for a
Yeah.
storyline, and we're not the people running around in a sewer somewhere and saying, "Oh, I'm a wizard," and
Right.
Oh, I thought you were about to make a knock on the Ninja Turtles. We might have had an issue.
no,
Yeah.
Right?
no, no.
Yeah, he said sewer.
Oh, I
and that
don't
was,
do that. No,
he said
no.
sewer, and
I
that was
know
the
better.
first thing
Hey,
I
you don't
said.
always have to have conflict. Have you ever played a Harvest Moon game?
No.
I'm just saying.
I don't even know.
And
What
there's
that's
a reason why I don't play Harvest Moon.
We,
no
we
idea what that
created
is.
your perfect world, but
Yeah.
it's perfect programming was only and equally to the monumental failure of how many crops rejected it.
You know, I think every person has their own opinion of where and how violence should have impact in their home, in their lives, whatever and so forth that may be. But I grew up learning very early on that what you see on TV, unless it's reported by the news, and even then it's not so much, what you see on TV is not real. It's fantasy. You're not supposed to do that. Whatever your religious background, your belief in our law and government may be,
Wrestling entertainment.
there are there are laws that you're to follow. There are things you are not supposed to do. A video game is not going to tell you how to live your life. A board game, a role-playing game is not going to tell you how to live your life. But there's two sides to this. Number one, as parents, as adults, and even as kids, teens who understand this, it is your life is your responsibility, not the responsibility of someone else. It's not the stuff you bring in. If it has an effect on you that is negative, you need to remove it.
Right.
But on the same side, those of us on the outside that don't have a problem with certain things, if someone you know that you consider close does have a problem with it, don't give them a hard time. It's their deal. If that's what they want, fine.
Yep.
Step away from it and
but
give it to
on
them.
the opposite side, don't have
Right, don't force it on others, too.
Yeah. I mean, like, if we start going back to like the 1950s TV shows, that is like, that's my example. It's like if we go back to like the Father Knows Best type of TV shows.
You've got some
I
explaining
will-
to do, Derek.
I know Lucy's an exception because she's hilarious, but but yeah, I will literally just
No. You'll figuratively
I
do
think-
something.
I think that where I feel like there should be a line. Okay, for example, I know that I just kind of went on when we first started this topic. I kind of talked a little bit about the kind of video games and things, but since we're kind of talking about video games and like somewhat television media, I love professional wrestling. I love UFC fighting. I am a cage fighting fan. I will watch
Two
any
guys
fight.
beat the crap out of each other no matter
yes.
what. Yeah.
should get into
I
chess
know,
boxing.
I know, I know that a lot of people, my wife sometimes included, can look at a lot of those things and say, well, that's so barbaric. That's basically like watching two gladiators going at it. And I said, my argument is I'm not watching this as in a competitive way where I'm waiting for one person to behead the other one because they have a distinct advantage over it. I look at it as right. Well, and a lot of people have compared like cage fighting, UFC fighting, professional wrestling to gladiatorial games, and during the Roman times, and well,
it's conflict resolution.
It is
through impulse control problems.
Right. I like that.
That is fantastic.
But I think that where the difference lies is, again, when you compare those two genres of combat, if you will,
quote unquote,
you've got during the gladiatorial days, you'd have a gladiator that was heavily armed and armored versus someone who had a sword in their hand and probably had never picked one up in their entire life, and it was people just watching for the slaughter of people, whereas when I watch a cage fight, when I watch a UFC fight, when I watch a pro wrestling match, I'm watching it for the entertainment when it comes to professional wrestling, the entertainment value of the storyline, or the contest with these two guys who have literally trained themselves up to be at the level of combat that they are at.
Measuring someone's
But
physical
yeah,
prowess.
it's still the combat that you're
It is.
watching.
It's part of the drive, yes.
It is. And it's I get the same adrenaline rush out of watching a good football game.
Or
It's the testosterone in males.
Yeah. it's just that combatant spirit that I have. And I get the same rush out of playing a really good game of Halo.
how about the League of Legends Championship?
I mean, I probably would. I mean, I'm just saying, because I like, I like watching people who have two
crap out of
opposing
each other.
sides. No, not necessarily beating the crap out of each other, but I like watching two people who have two very strong sides combat each other in even a really good debate. Like, as silly as it sounds, a really good debate to me is invigorating because I enjoy the challenge of competition. Is really what it comes down to. It's a competition thing to me. However, what I'm trying to get at is, I feel like, I think it was Katie who said you have to regulate your own rules inside your household. I would not be okay with my son, who is 4, sitting down and watching a UFC match with me because I don't feel like he understands fully what is going on. And I don't want to lie to him and say, and I'm not saying that what Josh was saying was a lie, but I don't want to lie to him and have him sit down and watch real media with me and say, oh, that's just fake. Oh, that's just pretend. Now, if I watched a pro wrestling match and my son sat down and watched it with me, then I could say, well, those two guys, they're actually friends, and they're just wrestling around and playing, kind of like, my brother and I, we wrestle all the time. We goof off and we wrestle all the time. We don't want to hurt each other. We're really out there to just have fun. That's what those guys are doing. If I'm sitting down to watch a UFC match, I'm not going to watch one if my son is in the room because I don't. And it's the same way. Like, I'm not going to watch Game of Thrones with my son in the room.
How about Once Upon a Time?
I would consider watching Once Upon a Time because, it is an NBC show, or it's an ABC show. It's sponsored by Disney, which means they're only going to go so far with the content.
The hook going through Gold's chest?
Well, granted, yes. But the difference is a lot of those are alluded to and you don't actually see the I'm just saying, you don't actually see the content, and technically I can legitimately tell my son this is a show in which there is a script and it is a fantasy and these are characters and that man is not actually hurting the other man, they're pretending. So when my son grabs a Nerf sword and he pretends he's a pirate and I pretend that I'm a dragon, he's not actually hurting me, we're playing a game. And he understands, he's 4, so he doesn't have as large of an understanding and knowledge base as, say, my brother who's 28. However, sometimes I think he makes better decisions.
That's debatable.
I was actually holding off
Yeah,
on
right.
making a knock
Yeah,
on that, so I'm glad you did it for me.
But he understands the difference between what is real and what is pretend. And the reason I know that he does is because I hear him in his room when he's playing by himself, and he understands what pretend is. So I know that if there is a situation that I cannot easily explain as it being pretend, I don't want him to be put in that situation.
And I mean, it's the reality versus the pretend.
It is
across the board.
Yes, and I think I totally 100% agree that I feel like it is a parental responsibility and duty, not a you should really do this. It's a, as a parent, if you are not doing this, you probably should reconsider being a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it is a parent's responsibility to sit down and set guidelines and rules and borders. And if your son is 13 and that game says it's mature, rated for 17 and up, if you wouldn't take them to a rated R movie by themselves, they shouldn't be sitting there playing that game.
Agreed.
And I may just have a much more conservative mindset than other people, but I feel like it is my responsibility as a parent to protect my sons from a specific amount of breaking of their innocence before they are mature enough to deal with that.
Yes. Totally, but I mean, it shouldn't be forced upon us.
That's correct. And just like the conversation I had with Josh earlier, we were talking about the Treehouse of Horrors from The Simpsons. I love watching the Treehouse of Horrors from The Simpsons cartoons. I'm not a huge Simpson fan anymore. I was when I was a kid.
Yep.
But I was telling Josh, regardless what your political stance is or anything like that, I feel like TV shows, animated TV shows like South Park and like The Simpsons and like
Family Guy,
and things like that are
American Dad.
a lot more liberal with their content, and I don't mean liberal in the political sense, but
Well,
liberal.
yes.
But I mean liberal in what they will allow in their show. I feel like it's much more liberal than I really want my son to be exposed to, and I don't even like those shows.
Right.
But I also know that Josh likes Family Guy. And I've seen a couple episodes of Family Guy that crack me up, and, I just get a really good belly laugh out of them. But I'm not going to impose what I don't like on Josh because I know he has different interests than I do.
And that's where we're coming
Yeah.
back full circle.
Right.
Is like Congress or saying, okay, well, we have to enforce this on everybody because certain parents, quote unquote, don't have the time to basically take care of the kids.
Yeah, I think it is 99.9% of the parental problem and 0.01% of the government problem. And to be honest, I feel like the government has done what they need to do with a rating system on music, a rating system on movies, a rating system on video games.
Build awareness.
Yeah.
And then the consequences is up to the parent, the child, and...
Absolutely.
Well, and the fact that you can censor
Yeah.
what your kid has access to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
what
yeah.
you're talking about earlier, what you can do with your TV, you can do it
You can do it with your
console.
iPad.
Well, that's
Yeah.
I know Mike, the host, and his wife both have an app on their phone called Kids Place or something like that.
Yep.
That will only let like certain apps
Certain
that they pick
apps,
be
yeah.
available when their 1.5-year-old plays with their phone.
And there are apps that will take care of internet as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, that's what the government has done. Everything they can do by saying, here's, rules and guidelines for rating. Here's
Yeah.
things you can do to prevent it. It's up to you now to be a responsible person, and anything you don't agree with or that you don't think kids should be viewing, then get rid of it yourself.
And
I want to play Saints Row.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I love Saints Row. But I feel like another big problem that we have is the misinformation of politicians and people who are in a, maybe not necessarily a political office, but maybe they have a big enough voice and position in their industry that they are an authority figure amongst people, and the misinformation that they have about video games, like Anton was talking about with Minecraft and things like that. So go ahead, Prime. And
I was just going to add, even with like the Nintendo 3DS, they have a parental lock for internet that you can't access unless you have a certain code, and that parents can put in for their children, so that way they don't have to worry about their kid accessing something they don't want them to.
Rhaegar?
Going back to the conversation that you and Derek were having about, would you want to sit down with your kid and show him this TV show at his ripe old age of 4? And, at some point you do want to introduce them to these things, the aspect that, actions have consequences. And if you're swinging a sword around, you should know that's going to create some kind of a harmful effect in another person if you hit him with it. Or a hook. If you hit him in the chest, blood's going to come out.
I mean, you could do it like in one foul swoop. You can just have them sit through Spartacus and just say, okay, here's everything.
Just
Wow,
one,
congratulations,
just the first
you're now,
Yeah.
you're now an
I think
adult.
the thing with